Good afternoon, everyone, and I'd like to call to order the Community Services Committee meeting for at 14:04 on February the 17th, 2022. And I want to acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the traditional territories of the Shishal and Squamish Nation. Welcome, everyone, to the first Community Services Committee meeting in about 8 years. And I'm a bit of a rookie chair, so bear with me. There may be some flubs along the way, but I'll try my best. First of all, we have an agenda here. Does anybody have any amendments, or can we adopt the agenda as is? Anybody have any amendments?
I'll second.
Move to adopt. Second it. All those in favor? Okay, agenda is adopted. Okay, we have some delegations here, and would staff like to make an intro, or should we just go straight to it? Okay.
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here at the new but not so new Community Services Committee meeting. So I do want to take the opportunity to thank Craig, Randy, and Peg for coming today. And I look forward to the discussion. I know that they have been active in Dakota Ridge since its inception and are integral volunteers right now. Mr. Adams keeps me up to date on the great volunteerism that we have on the Hill. So I do appreciate their willingness to come before you and maybe share with you a little bit about what their ideas are, and so that we can decide if there's action to be taken or what we want to do after their discussion. So with that, I will turn it over to these three individuals to share their ideas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So you feel free to turn on the microphone, okay. And you officially have 10 minutes for your presentation.
All right, thank you for seeing us this afternoon, you guys. I appreciate that, and I shall be quick. I'll give you a brief history on Dakota Ridge. I, along with a few individuals, started the Dakota Ridge Society over 20 years ago. We worked with the license holders and various users up in the ridge there, carved out a couple of parking lots, raised a few dollars to do a bit of limited plowing. And then at one point, it went to a different level when Pauline McHale was part of our group, applied and received Olympic Legacy funding, which took it to a whole different level. And at that time, the volunteer group kind of fell apart. People were moving off coast. So I was like the lone director of the Dakota Ridge Society, and I got to know Randy Udall at the time, who was the general manager of Parks and Recreation. Randy totally got the vision of what we were trying to do up there. And at that time, the regional district stepped in with both feet. And because of Randy, he'll never take enough credit for it, was a big part of this moving ahead. So that's briefly the history. I worked with Peg for years on the advisory committee. She was our chair, and she's also an active user of Dakota Ridge. So that's all I've got to say. Randy, Peg.
Okay, so yeah, I moved to Sunshine Coast partly because of Dakota Ridge, and it was because I read the proposal in Straight Coffee that was reading material before you could even drive up the hill. So I'm very motivated to do more up there. And we, as a group, behind us, there's quite a large group of people that are actively involved and have been involved for years, many of them, and have a great combined knowledge. So we feel that we, as a group, could offload some aspects of managing the operations at Dakota Ridge with a volunteer group that would help you meet the objectives of your master plan and could improve the experience for people up there, that we could be an asset. We haven't laid out any specifics of a plan at this point, but there are other examples of this happening in our province. None of them are with local government, though. There's partnerships at Telemark in Kelowna and Larch Hills in Salmon Arm, where local ski clubs have partnered with Parks, Trails, and is it Parks, Trails and Recreation? Whatever the government calls that body. And so they have frameworks set up already, and a lot of the operational volunteer management, trail improvement, prepping the trails before the start of grooming season, before the snow falls, et cetera, falls onto those groups. So, and we also, as a group, would actively seek sponsorship for the Ridge, hopefully not at the grassroots level where we have to hold dances and bake sales all the time, but we'll look for corporate sponsorship, business sponsorship to aid with any improvements that might want to be made there. So, at this point, we're just hoping that we could engage through the board recommendation, engage with staff in looking at the possibility of setting something like that up. Obviously this group has been proven that they got things going in the first place, and there's been some changeover. So is there anything I haven't touched on there?
I think you've covered that off. I mean, we've got a very dedicated group up there, including most of the groomers, and my wife and I have been volunteering as ambassadors there on the weekend. There's a few things we could maybe talk about. We would like to maybe take over the volunteers for Friday, Saturday, Sunday shifts. We didn't have a very difficult time finding 6 or 8 people to help volunteer this year. It's really important to have people up there on the ridge collecting fees, so we could do that as a volunteer group. And the groomers, I think, would like to have a little more freedom in their choices as well. And we've got a great group of groomers. I don't know if you're aware, but some of them have been grooming for 30, 40 years. And I skied there on Tuesday, and the conditions are absolutely superb. So it's a great group we have up there, and I think that's about it. You got anything to say?
Just to reiterate, I don't think the group is in a position they want to take over. The group isn't in a position where they want to take over the management of Dakota Ridge, but I think we're in a unique position that we can recruit other volunteers fairly easily, a lot easier than staff can. It's just not, I know that they just don't have the time for that type of thing, but in the community, when we talk about it to people that the group is looking to do something a little more formal, I've received nothing but positive feedback from people. So it's we would love to be able to start a conversation and see where we could all fit in. And it's a fantastic place to be. Everybody loves it. And we just want to do something that, as volunteers, that can enhance everyone's experience. Mm-hmm. Any questions?
All right, well, thanks for that. I guess I'll open it up to the board in a second. I guess my summary from what you've just presented is that you guys think that it would be easier for you to handle the recruitment for the force. I'm not clear what you mean by more freedom for the groomers. In what way is it inhibited right now?
There's one situation, I think, this year when the RD was not able to get gas or diesel up to the machine. I'm not sure what had happened. Maybe somebody wasn't feeling well that week, but the groomers were ready to go, but we don't have I guess they didn't take the initiative to go ahead and get the diesel up there themselves. So because of that, the grooming wasn't done for an entire week. That's one small example, but I talked to Nathan Wade on Tuesday, actually. We'd still very much like to see Nathan and Jesse up there once a week. They could be your eyes on the ground up there. We get along really well with both those guys. So we just like to be able to choose if we want to go up and groom on a Wednesday or not. And that's basically all that is.
Oh, okay. And, okay, I guess I'll open it up to the directors at this point. Any of the directors have any questions? Director Hiltz?
Thanks for the initiative there. So the group, it is called a group. Has that group got any formal status? There was a society now before. Does that still exist? Is the group?
No, the group is just the group at this point. So we had talked to Shelley about different models and things like that. We're not sure how this is all going to look, whether it's going to be another society or a club. Personally, I'd like to see another club because I'd like to see it a little more social up there. Everybody goes up there, does their thing, and then they go home. So eventually, I'd like to see a club. Whether there's an advantage to being another society for donations or tax purposes, I'm not aware of, so.
And if I may, the follow-up though, so the conversations have been with staff already. You had some preliminary conversations with staff.
A little bit, yes, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. So I think this is probably going to be more of a question for our GM in regards to being that this is an asset that the regional district manages, and currently the volunteers fall under our sphere. I'm wondering about the coverage of the volunteers by SCRD policies, if a group takes on that initiative of being the volunteer entity, the volunteer recruitment entity, I guess maybe is the best way to put it right now as we move forward. I'm wondering if staff has looked into that piece yet, because I know volunteers are covered a certain amount by our policies right now, and how that would look going forward if there is another group in a third party arranged.
To staff.
Thank you for the question. You are correct. All the volunteers are actually covered under their liability insurance. They're covered under the SCRD. So we do get lists. They have documentation that has to be signed, and we are ultimately responsible for that liability as it relates to the volunteers. So at this point, I haven't pursued any questions because I'm not really sure on what those questions are and what that would look like. But they are covered just like the machinery is owned and covered through the insurance of the SCRD as well.
All right, we'll go. Oh,
I'm just
you have a
wondering
comment,
if
Peg?
it's all right for me to comment
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that. In the models that I've looked at for both Large Hills and Telemark, that is covered off in the agreements, and in that case, Parks and Trails keeps the liability insurance for everyone, and then they sign agreements as to how the volunteers are going to be managed.
All right, back to staff.
Yes, thank you. I think that one of the key elements that probably needs to be examined is who the agreement is with. So if the agreement with RSTBC, I always get that acronym mixed up as well, is with the SCRD, then ultimately the SCRD is liable for that. If the agreement is with another group outside of the SCRD, that changes things significantly, because then we'd have to look at, what the role of the SCRD is versus the group. So I think I was contacted in the fall, and we weren't really clear on exactly what the group is wanting to get involved in. And so before I engage staff in time and effort to have a conversation around a different operating model or what that might look like, I wanted to make sure that it was a priority for the board and that they would support that, because we certainly have put forward our service plans for the year and such. I want to preface by saying the volunteers are critical to Dakota Ridge, and I recognize, and not only recognize, but applaud their efforts throughout the years, and we couldn't do it without them. So we're not opposed to having conversations at all. It's just, maybe what we need to do is have some exploratory and probably come back to the board with more information about exactly what is the group looking at in terms of which pieces, what the implications of that might be. But that will take certainly time and effort from staff. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Director McMahon.
Right, I just wanted to say, this sounds great. I'm thoroughly behind it. Volunteer groups do wonderful stuff on the coast. Look at the Tetrahedron Club and managing the park. And I think our contract with the Coast Mountain Bike Association at Sprockets has worked out really well too. So I think this is a terrific direction to go.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. I was just sort of wondering, you mentioned there was a society which has sort of gone the way that often societies do, but there are benefits to that. So, because of charitable status and seeking corporate donation. So, are you considering sort of reseeking charitable status and forming a new society?
Yeah, we did
Yeah.
discuss that possibility at the larger group meeting, that we would reactivate the society,
Yeah.
basically.
It is challenging with all the other things you have to deal with it in CRA and all that fun stuff, but the benefit from the charitable donation point of view, I think, is really worth it. So thank you.
Okay.
And thank you for what you do. It's, you're constantly hearing about the good things that are happening up there. So thanks for all the work.
Okay, Director Hiltz.
I guess this is kind of a question for staff. Staff is asking the board, do you want us to change your work plan? I think that's kind of what you're asking us. So are we talking about a certain amount of time here? That how much of an alteration to the work plan for this year versus the following year? So I'm not sure who should be answering that question about how much are you wanting us to say, go ahead and change? Thanks.
Thank you. That's a great question. So I think the first piece is, it sounds like there's support to engage in the conversation. So that's the first piece. And that conversation will really then help me understand what we're looking at. So if we are, if it's going to be an involved process, then absolutely it will take me looking at people's work plan and backburning other priorities that the board has suggested are our priorities. But what that is, I don't know, because I don't know what the time is. So I think we need to have some initial conversations, and then I would fully anticipate coming back here with some better ideas of exactly what pieces of operations we might be looking at, what are the ramifications of that. I think in terms of timing, initially, if I remember correctly, Craig, you were looking at wanting to have this in place for this next year of operation, which could be very tight depending on what we're talking about. So I think as long as we're all willing to enter into the conversation with some flexibility around timing and what that might look like, but in the spirit of cooperation and knowing that this potentially could be a great partnership opportunity, I think we'll at least be able to understand a little bit better what we might be looking at, the time commitment by staff, and then be able to come back if that's okay with the board.
Okay, well, it does sound like there's appetite for maybe making a motion here. I do have one prepared. It goes something like this. Motion that staff enter into discussions with the Dakota Ridge Volunteer Group to explore the possibility of the Dakota Ridge Volunteer Group taking an increased and formalized role in providing the Dakota Ridge service delivery. I'm wondering if there's anybody who... So we've got a mover and somebody seconding. Do you have any questions?
And there is a follow-up that we are expecting staff to report back to us before the fall period. Is that what we're...
And so, yeah, do we want to add a timeline to that? Or can we just leave it with staff at this point?
Sorry, our apologies. Thank you. I think it's reasonable for us to come back before the end of Q3, certainly with that initial finding. I would anticipate we'd be back sooner than that if we're trying to implement anything by the next season. So if you put Q3 on it, it gives us a bit of wiggle room, but understand that we would probably initiate those conversations in the very near future to at least get a sense as to, where we might have the ability to go, whether it's a phased approach or what that looks like. But yes, thank you.
Okay, since it's been moved and seconded, I guess we'll need an amendment. Director Pratt, do you have anything else to say?
I was just going to say I'll move that amendment
Okay,
to add Q3.
seconded by Director McLean? Director Matt? All right, all those in favor of the amendment?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, you wanted to speak to the amendment?
It just very briefly is, I think, in putting a timeline on it, it not only helps staff with your timeline, but it also gives some certainty to the community as well. So I think adding the Q3 in was a good point. So thank
Okay,
you.
Great. All right, we'll do this one again for posterity. All those in favor of the amendment? Okay, is there any more comments around the motion? As amended? Thank you. All right, all those in favor? Thank you, motion carried. Well, thanks very much for coming, very much appreciated, and we look forward to hearing back from staff and from you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to, to the reports. And do we have any communications in this agenda? I don't think so. So I think we just need to receive all the reports. Motion to receive all the reports? Yeah. And seconded? All those in favor? All right, thanks. That motion carries. All right, so we are going to item number 3, Community Services Department Q4 Year-End Report. Does GM Gagnon want to make an intro on that?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to present to the board or to the Community Services Committee our Q4 year-end report that gives a summary of the things that we were able to accomplish in Q4. And I want to thank the managers of the various divisions, I always get divisions and departments mixed up, for pulling together this information and for their staff and for all the work that was done. So with that, I do have all of the managers. I see them in the gallery, and they are available to answer any questions that you might have at this time. So thank you very much.
Okay, I'll open it up to directors at this point. Does anybody have any questions? Director McMahon.
Sure. It is great to be back to capacity at all our facilities again. Does this mean that we no longer have to file COVID safety plans if we rent a community hall? She said, hopefully.
I will turn that one over
To
to
staff.
Manager Dawn. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, safety plans are not. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, can you say that again? You might need to speak for a little while because the technology system hasn't caught up yet with voices talking into it.
No problem. So, COVID safety plans does not require renting facilities at this time. Thank you.
And can we try that one more time, please?
So currently, no, COVID safety plans are not required for renting recreation facilities. Thank you.
All right, awesome.
Third time's the
Well, third time is the charm, and at least we waited 3 times for that good news. Thank you. All right, Director Lee.
Just a quick question about Catherine Park. I see we were request for proposal for a new parks operator. Did the other ones retire, or is this just a routine thing?
Thanks for the question, and through the chair. This is a routine thing. They not so much retired as chose to move on. They had a great experience. Mike and Donna were an important part of the service delivery there, and they'll be missed by all the parks operations crew as well as a lot of the regular visitors to the park. So we wish them the best in their new life. They've just chosen to be closer to family and gear down as they enter their retirement years. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd heard nothing but good things about them, so it was kind of disappointing, but that's the way it goes.
Thanks, Director Lee. Okay, Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at, it's on page 6, it's about Area F, storm damage to parks, and so it was a question for staff. At the Shirley Macy Dog Park, there was a overland flooding event that happened 3 or 4 times over the last atmospheric river season that we have, which caused some damage to sort of the parking area, and it's caused by a Moti culvert, and it looks like it's affecting the service of the parking. So is that been part of the storm damage assessment for Area F? Thanks.
To staff.
Thanks for the question, Director Hilt, and through the chair. It was a part of the flooding and the high water events that occurred, but not the emergency event. So that damage to the parking area was inspected immediately after the damage had occurred, and because it was affecting park use and access, we handled it through base budget, and park staff contracted out the work to fix the parking area. We are in discussions with Modi and their maintenance contractor on corrections and regular maintenance on the culvert that caused the damage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director McLean.
Yeah, thank you. I got a transit question here. So I note that custom transit is recovering a lot slower than conventional transit. So just briefly, why is that from your perspective? And in the past, I've heard that custom transit Handy Dart was over capacity, had a lot of demand. Are we seeing higher customer satisfaction now that it has lower demand?
I guess that would be a question for Mr. Walton.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. I would say the reason for a lower increase in ridership because of COVID is because the day programs for seniors have not started up again, and that was a huge component of our ridership. So that would be my main and real answer to that question. And sorry, what was your second question?
Just regarding, like, my impression was that custom transit was at capacity prior to COVID, and there was long delays to get use for it. Are we seeing quicker response times, higher satisfaction with the current users?
That would be a biased opinion because we don't actually track the ridership opinion. We don't send those surveys out necessarily, but yes, I would say because ridership is lower, we still have the same staffing levels. We do have 2 darts out there nowadays. You would be seeing, I would say, equal service levels, because I'd like to say that we've always shown when it comes to customer service and our customers being satisfied.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. Director McMahon.
Right. I was at the Elphinstone Community Association meeting last night, and one of the topics that came up is the damage to the shoreline along Ocean Beach Esplanade there around Chester Park and the foot of Harry Road. Back in 2012, there was a shoreline stabilization project that was basically a breakwater that we went in and put big rocks and anchored down very large logs to forestall erosion of the shoreline there. And on the bright side, you know, if we hadn't done that, we probably would have lost most of the park this winter. But the shoreline has taken a real beating. The logs that were anchored, several of them have broken loose, and the water is lapping right at the edge of the road. So is there are park staff or recreation staff or any staff looking at this and looking at what we can do?
I guess that would be a question for Manager Clarkson. Oh, you do need to unmute yourself, though.
My apologies. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question, Director McMahon. Park staff are aware. It's been reported, and we've noted it in inspections. I think if I could maybe lean to process a little bit. There's a few budget proposals related to archaeological and environmental planning on board for park services for 2022. Specifically at Ocean Beach Esplanade. And I think those are being asked as a requirement for lease renewals, those sorts of things on behalf of the nation. We look forward to working with them in a collaborative fashion and engaging those technical specialists. And I think that recommendations around improvements for that foreshore area directly adjacent and in front of Chester Park will probably be high priority on the list of recommendations, at least within the environmental report. So to answer your question, it's a little bit of question of process before implementation, if that makes sense. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Director Hiltz.
Another one, thanks. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm on page 12. It's the Recreation Facility Service. It's around the fire sprinklers. It says that there was no issues found in the sprinkler piping, and the question is, was this included in internal inspection? Because at SAC, that was where it was found. The regular maintenance didn't find it. It was so is this the enhanced, or is this kind of, was there an internal inspection, I guess, for looking for that corrosion? Thanks.
To staff.
Thank you for the question. Yes, we had an internal inspection done on the sprinkler systems at the Sunshine Coast Arena and the Gibsons Area Community Center, which confirmed that those systems are in good condition.
Thank you. And while we're speaking to Mr. Van Velzen, I'll ask him a question as well. There was a talk, I believe last year we got a report that the heat pump in the Seashell Aquatic Center was no longer functional. I'm wondering if and when there may be a plan to reinvigorate that one, and when the budget request may be happening, considering the greenhouse gas emissions of heating everything with gas. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. Yes, one of the heat pumps has failed, and we are looking at replacing that from an emissions perspective. Staff have determined that the payback through energy savings on that doesn't equate to the replacement cost. However, there is sufficient emissions reduction to look at pursuing replacement. We're looking at replacement for 2023, so you can expect probably to see a budget request for next year.
Thanks for that. Director McMahon.
And I'm starting to get lots of questions about Chester House. Is there any update on the poor soggy Chester House?
All right, to staff about soggy Chester House.
I will maybe perhaps start that, and then I'll turn it over to Manager Clarkson. So we have ordered a structural assessment, and I believe that we have secured a company to do that. So that is underway, and once we get the results of that, we'll be able to have more information on the integrity of the home itself, and then be able to, or the hall, and then be able to map out the where to from here. Manager Clarkson, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, thank you, GM Gagnon. I would just say that I was in touch with facility maintenance staff this morning, who assured me everything's on track. We're just requesting an update on the report. So we're awaiting the final confirmation of the structural assessment and the report so we can analyze, interpret, and present some options to the board. Thank you.
Follow up?
Yes, and the footbridge, regardless of whether the house opens or not, lots of people are champing at the bit to cross the bridge. So that's part of the same report?
So once again, perhaps if you'll indulge me, I'll start the answer. So until in order to access the hall, of course you need the bridge, and that's, I guess we're waiting to find out what condition the hall is in before we open the bridge, first of all. And before we have to do something with the bridge, there definitely was damage to the bridge, and depending on what happens with the hall in that park would determine how we may replace that bridge, what that would look like. So it's a bit of a cart and a horse, and so we do want to start with the hall and understand what the future of the hall might be before we open up that area. I will suggest that during and after the flooding event, there were people that were placing themselves at risk by continuing to perhaps go into areas that we strongly suggested that they don't. So we have continued to keep that bridge closed because there is some unsafe areas there. And so until we know more, it will remain closed. But hopefully, it takes a while to procure those services, as you all know. But now that we have, hopefully the report is forthcoming and we'll be able to put a plan together sooner than later. Thank you.
and follow up again.
So what about the back gate so that people can cross the lawn to get to the beach?
That one I'll turn over to Manager Clarkson.
Thank you very much. And I would say staff can assess. I know that the reason the accesses were closed because they presented a threat to either public safety or a threat to our asset protection measures. On next inspection, if that back gate can be opened, we will do so. If in fact some of the drainage and some of the issue may have been kind of outside of the immediate hall footprint, and that's why that gate is closed, we will remain closed to protect public safety. Thank you.
All right. Before I get to Director Hiltz, I will ask another question. I was looking at the cemeteries, and it looks like there's a project kicking off with Ely's and Associates looking at our cemeteries. But I was curious how much life we've got left in our cemeteries, and probably none.
No pun intended, right?
That was,
he was thinking about that for a while.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Manager Clarkson. I'll just start off by saying that as the board is well aware of, the money for the master plan at the cemetery was approved back in 2018, and for a series of unfortunate events, here we are in 2022, but I am very pleased to say that we have kicked it off and that planning is underway, and our timelines are very aggressive to get it done, because one of the main points of the cemetery plan is to understand how many more years we have left, in terms of the amount of burials and interments that we have every year. So if you were just to take a look at the data, we did certainly have a report a few years ago that said we had anywhere between 5 and 8, so we're probably still there. Burials and plot sales did go down for a bit, but they're back up again. So we do anxiously await that report to get that information and then plan on how do we plan for the future, and making sure that we are able to adhere to the Cemeteries Act and have our supply meet our demand and have some long-range planning. So with that, I will turn it over to Manager Clarkson if he has any more specifics. Thank you.
Thank you, GM Gagnon, and through the chair. All that information is accurate, and yeah, we're very much looking forward to finalizing the cemetery business planning project with Eric Lees and Associates. They've got a wealth of experience. Their subject matter expertise is almost unmatched in terms of cemetery service delivery, I think, in the province. They got together like 60 years of experience. So we're in good hands. Part of that process will be to not only determine life expectancy for service delivery, as well as to analyze and maybe interpret and recommend some options, should we have them, for expansion of properties, those sorts of things. So what I can say is we have about 40 full burial plots left. What that equates to in years depends largely on the demand for service. So we realize that's a very real, tangible number, and time is running out. Hence why we've expedited the finalization of the cemetery business plan. Look forward to bringing it to the board for information and any recommendations in the very near future. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Let's hope further pandemics are not going to speed things up too much. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. I think this is my last one. It's about the Ports Monitoring Committee and the upcoming POMO meeting. And just has there been any decisions on format? We've been talking about hybrid, all electronic, in person, and so has there been any decisions yet on that? Thanks.
To staff.
Thank you for the question. We are going to be hosting a POMO meeting hopefully at the beginning of Q3, and it will be a hybrid meeting. You will see a report coming forward in March as we need to fill a couple of vacancies on POMO. So that's the update. Thank you.
All right. And I don't see any other questions, but I've got, Director Hiltz, you've got a follow-up?
Yeah, the report says Q1, you say Q3 for POMO, just...
Q2? No.
I know, split the difference, yeah.
We had actually hoped to have a meeting in Q1,
Right.
but I'm not sure that that's going to get
Okay.
organized in time without the report coming forward. We didn't think there was
Right.
no sense having a meeting with vacancies, so
Exactly.
thank
So
you.
Q-
Q2.
Q2? Okay, all right, thanks.
All right, so yesterday in the agenda review, there was a quick discussion around our lifeguards, and I thought that would be a good one to share with the board. How is our lifeguard situation? Director Don, or no, Manager Don, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we need approximately 10 lifeguards in order to return to kind of normal operating hours or normal service levels. And we need a various combination of full-time staff, part-time staff, and also casuals. So there's a little bit to it. But yeah, we do need quite a few more. So keep sending them our way. Thanks.
Okay. Do we have any more question? One question I had was on page 10, Sunshine Coast Arena, Heroes. What and who is Heroes? Manager Don, do you maybe know the answer on that one?
Yes, thank you. So Heroes program was a program that reached out to challenged youth, and we had some good partnerships with the local RCMP detachment and lots of volunteers. And essentially it was a program where these youth that didn't have access to hockey gear, ice, things like that, it would be provided as part of this program through various partnerships, as I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, they lost a lot of their volunteers and kind of usership. So there was a hiatus this year, but we very much hope that we can return the program next year. And we also still have all of the kind of gear and equipment that were donated over the years. So yeah, it was a very good program in the community, and unfortunately it wasn't here this year, but we have hopes that it'll return again in the upcoming ice season. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, is there anything else on this topic? No, I don't see any hands up. So thank you to staff for all those answers, and we'll move on to Director Hiltz?
Just under the wire.
Just under the wire, yeah. It was on Keats Island, the geotechnical assessments on West and Wreck Beach. It's been a topic of Keats Island for some time. Just wondering, the communications back to the residents, is there a particular method that it's doing, or is it happening? Just to let them know that they're not neglected, right? I think they need some reassurances that stuff is happening.
All right, to staff.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. The communication is happening. It hasn't happened for a couple of months. We met, staff went out, planning and community development staff, as well as parks operations staff, to discuss the issues, some of the options, and some of the ways that we can work together. Through that process, I believe the group on Keats Island has been provided our community-led improvements projects form. Staff are working with them on filling it out so that we can determine the resources being requested. But we've also promised to look at our annual operation work plan and tentatively look to book some time in the spring to send some operations staff out and handle some of the target priorities like drainage corrections, where we can invest a few days where typically we haven't. So we look forward to working a little bit more with the communities on Keats Island on parks enhancements. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, Director Lee has now gotten his hand up.
I wasn't going to ask the question, but I think I will. On page 6 at the bottom, it says something about working closely with planning on a high volume of sudations. Sudations is sweating. I was just wondering what word was supposed to be there.
All right, to staff, who is sweating?
Me right now trying to figure out what that word is supposed to be. I think it is subdivisions and rezoning park referrals, yeah. Sudation, subdivision.
All right.
Thank you.
Sweating problems managed. Okay, I think we will move on to item number 4, and we're starting a new section of our agenda that is really more infrastructure than community services, but we'll deal with it anyway. We've got GM Rosenboom, who is going to do an introduction on the all of these, I believe, and he's got a few slides to present, so take it away, GM Rosenboom.
Thank you for the opportunity to Chair Thijs. So yes, it's not desired that we're here today to present 9 reports about wastewater. But given the anticipated financial plan adoption next week, we decided that it would be the most appropriate time to present these reports, given that we only were came aware of certain issues in the last several weeks. So I prepared some slides that I'm going to share with all of you. So in 2020, there were asset management plans prepared for all the wastewater plants. And in those, recommendations were included to have user fees fund operational costs for the facilities, as well as frontage fees following the capital costs associated with the facilities. Subsequently, the financial SCRD financial plan was amended to the financial sustainability policy was amended to implement that the deviation in terms of where which costs are being funded from which type of fee or taxes accordingly. So in 2020, the user fees were only partially increased to fund the full operations of the different services. So during the last 2 years, there was continued to be operating reserves funding operating costs instead of user fees. However, also since 2019, we've been putting significantly more effort in operations of maintenance of our wastewater treatment plants to improve the performance and extended lifespan. And prior to 2019, there were significant issues with most of the plants that and they were not properly addressed. And we're currently continuing to work hard to address any performance issues and to make sure that the maintenance is adequate to actually get the lifespan out of the facilities that they were planned for. And then in combination with that, in November, unfortunately, staff only applied a limited scope to their user fee rate reviews. We didn't include all the costs and all the rate increases for 2022 in the data we presented at that time to the committee. And those data were subsequently used to determine the rates for 2022 for the facilities. Further analysis that we completed in preparation of the financial plan adoption next week, we confirmed that for 9 of the services, there's actually insufficient user fees to fund the operational costs of the facilities. It's very unfortunate that for one of those facilities, which is Square Bay, the operating reserves are also insufficient to cover the shortfall for this year. And legislatively, we cannot budget for a deficit. So ultimately, what we need to get to is a place where, as per our policy, that the user fees fund the operating costs. And for this year, we acknowledge that for 9 services, that might be really challenging to do. So therefore, and especially given the timing of these reports, and when we confirmed this underfunding only several weeks ago, there was insufficient time to engage with any of the service users to allow, if there is still the desire to adopt a financial plan next week. So this table outlines the 9 services in questions: Greaves Road, Wood Creek, Jolly Roger, Secret Cove, Square Bay, Langdale, Roberts Creek, Co-housing Treatment, Little Lake, and Sakanai. The amount of underfunding is included in the second column, and they vary from $468 for Greaves to $28,000 for Square Bay, where I have to say that Greaves Road is, for example, only a system with 5 users. So if you divide $468 by 5 users, there will be an increase required to fully operate the operational expenditures by user fees from $93.60. So the second column indicate what will be required to fully fund the operating cost by user fees. And you can see that those amounts vary from $21 to $348. So the last column is our staff recommendations that we have included in the report, which is for the majority of the facilities that we propose to continue to fund the budget shortfall by operating reserves, acknowledging that for some of the treatment plants, this will result in operating reserve levels will fall below what we target, below our target. But we feel that it's acceptable given the circumstances, and additional engagement with the community will happen throughout the year prior to next year. For Square Bay, that is not possible because the operating reserves are not sufficient to fund the actual shortfall. So the proposal is there to increase the fees by 23.6%, which is about $150 for residential property, defer several operational projects, and just like for the other facilities, do additional engagement throughout the year in preparation of the rate setting for 2023. So what's next? Based on the recommendations by the committee today, there will be need to amend and adopt any rate bylaws that will need to be adopted, and that will need to happen prior to the financial plan adoption next week. And if for any of the services decision is made to increase the rates, we'll make sure that there is additional engagement with those communities prior to the utility bills going out in mid-April, so that they're aware of the fact that what is coming. For all services, we'll do ongoing work to see if we can find any operational efficiencies in our systems to reduce the cost, and we'll engage with all the service users as outlined in the communication plan that is currently being considered to be included in the financial plan, which will include a Let's Talk page for each of the facilities, more information, more easy accessible information on asset management, and meetings with the service users in advance of the 2023 rate proposals to be presented to the community, to the board. And that's it. And staff are here to answer any questions you might have. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, GM Rosenboom. And we'll start with the difficult one first. This will be Square Bay. And I do believe that there are some folks in the room that would like to potentially ask some questions. What we'll do is we'll have the debate with the directors first and see if they have any questions, and then before we vote on any motions, we'll certainly give you a chance to chat. You'll just have to come up to the microphone and speak into it. It is a difficult one because it's such short notice. And so we do want to accommodate any questions that folks out of the community might have. Does staff want to do a quick overlook of the Square Bay one, because it does have 3 options in it, unlike the other ones, and maybe give us a quick rundown.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Chair Thijs. The proposal, it's awkward. I can't see myself anymore on Zoom. Whatever. There I am again. So, for Square Bay, we identified we confirmed 3 options, and they are presented on page 20 of the agenda. That's where they start. And I'll start actually at option 3 and work my back way to option 1 to make it easy for everybody. Option 3 is we would completely, fully deplete the reserves we have. And we only increase the rates with the minimum required to balance the budget. That will end up with an uncommitted balance at the end of the year of about $70, and it would still require a 10% increase to the user fees and it would equate to $63.60. This option would also include the deferral of some operational projects that we currently have on the books. And those are outlined on page 19 and 20. So it would include the deferral of the project to establish a right-of-way. We've been operating the system already for numerous years now, and several years ago, the board approved a budget to establish a missing statutory right-of-way. So we're proposing to defer that for reconsideration as part of the 2023 budget. Another project that we're proposing to defer is system upgrades, a system upgrade planning project. This project would allow us to do a full-on system analysis of the collection system, and that would support any future grant applications to actually do the system upgrades itself. And we propose to defer that. There's 2 other projects on the books to reduce the current infiltration of rainwater in our collection system. And the infiltration of rainwater in our collection system ultimately results in overflowing of the treatment plant and the release of not fully treated water into the ocean. And we're proposing to continue that work, only defer $5,000 of that of the current budget to next year for reconsideration as part of next year's budget. So option 3, as I just outlined, is proposing to defer those projects as well as completely deplete the reserves. Option 2 is doing quite the opposite. It's not deferring the projects, and it's increasing the rates by the required amount, which will equate to an almost 55% increase to the rates. And it would equate to $348.22. That will mean that for next year, there will be no reconsideration required in terms of a big user fee increase. Option 1 is more or less the combination of the middle ground between the other 2. It's, yes, we would defer the projects, but we also would not fully deplete the reserves. So there would still be $6,000 left in reserves at the end of the year to fund any unexpected expenditures. And it would require ultimately a 23.6% increase to the user fee. And that's the option that we're recommending for Square Bay, given that we feel that's the most balanced approach from the 3 options presented and the others analyzed. Staff are happy to answer any questions.
All right, we'll open it up to the directors at this point. Do any of the directors have a question? Yep. Director Pratt?
I don't want to take too much time because I do want to allow, because the residents, I have a couple of residents here from Square Bay, and I want to make sure that they have plenty of space to ask any questions that they may have. But I think probably my biggest one is are we sure this isn't going to happen in the future with the miscalculation? Because this is significant for residents on short notice to have to take in, and I made a very conscious decision the last couple of years to be very careful in not increasing wastewater rates until we had a clear, until we had a lot of community engagement. So I'm understandably a little frustrated, which so I just want to make sure that the miscalculations that happened have we made sure that that's not going to happen in the future, or put in a safeguard some way.
All right, to staff, any details on that?
I'll start an answer and leave it up to CFO to follow up. Yes, we're fully aware of the impact. Staff are fully aware of the impact that this information at this time to the users, and we're definitely not proud of the fact that we have to bring these reports forward at this point in time, especially for the Square Bay community. For the other, I think it's so, as I explained in my presentation, the rationale behind this is underfunding over the last several years, but we're able to accommodate it from operating reserves only for Square Bay. We're currently not able to do so anymore. And so we're definitely not proud of the fact that we miscalculated in November the data we presented to the board, and the CFO and I are definitely working already on improving our internal processes so that this is not going to happen again, because we're not proud of this.
Okay. Does CFO have anything to say on that?
Yeah, most certainly echo GM Rosenbluth's comments. And I think what we have developed are some internal processes to guide staff. So create templates and formulas and formats for people to do this. Also changing timing. So definitely looking at all our internal processes before these things come to board, as far as integrating, as well as integrating the public consultation. So we look for a sort of a life cycle flow for this. And I think that's what GM Rosenblum and I are working on with staff. So, and of course, that can be part of the community dialogues that are going to be happening shortly.
All right. Does that work for you, Director Pratt? I have more questions. Okay. Well, I'll go to Director Lee for now, and then we'll come back to Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. My first thought was that the communications plan cost wouldn't be carried over into 2023, but I think I might have heard that we're planning on having ongoing communications. So that might be carried over for 2023. And of course, I'm talking about all of these plants because they all have that same cost. So I'd like to see if I could get a comment on that.
To staff.
Thank you for the question, Director. The communication plans, as proposed at our round 2 budget, are still to be adopted as part of next week's final financial plan adoption, and hence they are not really being carried over because they will be new projects. So that's why they're listed separately.
All right, follow up.
So the increase in user fees for this year wouldn't necessarily be carried over into next year then for all of these plants, because that expense wouldn't be there. Is my logic faulty here?
To staff.
I think that our CFO is best able to answer that question.
Yeah, and I think that right now we're doing a one-time pilot for some more significant engagement with the community group. So that requires additional staff resources. So I think for this year, we're going to see how it rolls out. We put some estimated budget and time. We'll learn more about what actually those costs and process will look like. But what I believe is each year we will have some type of engagement with the users, whether it's mail out conversations. But I think that's what we're trying to develop as part of this year's communication plan is how best do people want to be communicated? How do they want to be engaged? Do they want a longer commitment for rate structures, et cetera? So I think those are some of the outcomes to come out of this year that'll better inform what the future engagement and communication with the user groups are going to look like. I know one of the comments was very specific, almost like what this particular staff reports or these 9 staff reports look like to provide that type of information to the users. I know that was one of the requests. So those are the types of things that we have to develop from an ongoing basis.
Thank you. I definitely do believe we need to communicate more with our users. So that's cool. We'll find out later in the year then what the next year's rates would be. Can I ask one more question while I'm talking?
I guess so.
Did we consider using capital to cover the Square Bay for this year?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we did. As you can see in the tables, there is a big part of the capital of the frontage fees are being used to pay for debt in the service. And the annual 2022 contribution to capital reserves is currently listed at $1,200. And that will be insufficient to offset the budget shortfall we have for this year. So we considered it $1,200, and we considered that it would be better to increase the capital reserves with that amount instead of using it to offset user fees, especially given that it would be contrary to our financial sustainability policy.
All right. Thanks for that. Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments that have come up for me as I've been wrapping my head around this as well as, I don't want to staff to take all the blame because they certainly did advise on increasing fees, and I made a very big stand on not increasing fees without the consultation. So. Or community and communication plan. So I do recognize my role in the underfunding of the reserves at this point. So I don't want staff to fall completely on my sword. So it is to be shouldered by myself as well. And I did want to, I asked our CFO and our GM of infrastructure and the CAO, well, can I use my constituency expense to use for the communication? And because it's outside the service, it's not considered legislatively possible. Gas tax funding, because a lot of these expenses are operational. They're not capital expenditures. So we're at limited options here, and which is, it's unfortunate that this is the situation we're in, but this is where we are. Thank you.
All right. I didn't see a question on that, so we'll move on to Director McMahon.
I had a general question. I understood that this year during the atmospheric rivers, we had a bunch of emergency pump outs. And I also note that we've been getting contracts coming to us with increased prices for parts because of supply chain issues and so forth. So do we anticipate that the operating budgets of these services are going to rise?
To staff.
Thank you. To be honest, it's to be determined. Last year, we indeed had additional costs associated with the atmospheric rivers in November. Any overtime and additional contracted services time we were able to recoup, get reimbursed by the NBC. So that was very beneficial. So those costs were already included in this assessment. So still, we were close to budget for most of the facilities. For example, Square Bay, we had a surplus of $2,000, but one additional pump out would have put us significantly already over budget. So will they continue to rise? I think yes, the expenditures will continue to rise. Will it also result in increased operating total budget? I think that's what the further analysis that we're going to do in terms of operational efficiency. Where can we find that? What can we do differently? Might play a role in that. However, I also have to acknowledge that some of the systems, including Square Bay, still, before we have addressed all the outstanding issues with the infiltration system, until that time, operational costs will continue to be as they are, or in the order of magnitude as they are right now, before they can actually drop down to maybe more to lower levels.
All right, thanks for that. All right, I guess at this point, I'm happy to take any questions that the audience might have. Yeah, if you want to just come up and turn on the microphone by pushing on the little face with the button there, the middle button there. You should have a red rim around your microphone when it turns. There you go.
That one?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to turn it off for a moment so my paper rustling doesn't.
Okay. Yeah. So when you're ready, just introduce yourself and then take it away.
So this is a new experience for me talking through a mask, so we shall see how well it goes. By way of introduction, my name is Peter Galbraith. You, in your various committees and board meetings, have presentations from loads of people, so I won't presume that you'll remember me, but pretty well exactly 2 years ago, I gave a pretty lengthy presentation on the whole broad issue about wastewater rates and so forth. It was well, I'm kind of confused now by all your committee names.
The Infrastructure Services Committee meeting.
That would have been the one, and
Yep.
but there was also the corporate, the Special Corporate and Admin Services Committee too. So that's a subject for another point, trying to understand what the different committees do. I think I raised the fact that I spoke to this group, I'll say this group 2 years ago, to give you a degree of context. This isn't something that I've just read and thought, gee, I'd like to come in and talk. I know quite a bit about what's going on about the wastewater rates. My professional background was in the consulting engineering side, and so I know of what I talk, let's put it that way. By way of another bit of context, you'll probably know that Square Bay has been one of the most vociferous areas in regards to the whole issue, mainly of the frontage fees. And we have significant, and continue to have significant frustrations there, because I hear great talk of engagement, but frankly, our attempts to engage in meaningful ways with the SCRD have been challenging. Laurie, you have lent an attentive ear, but when we attempt to explain some of the philosophies, it tends to get pushed right back that the SCRD's view of what capital planning is quite different to ours. The SCRDs is right, and therefore that's what it's going to be. So I will make this comment that if community engagement going forward is just coming out and telling everybody what you're planning to do without adequate appreciation or recognition of what reasonably well-educated people in the community are saying, then I think your community engagement is headed for a rocky road. So please don't think that just by putting $2,000 in a budget per community and saying you're going to come out and tell us what you're doing, that you've solved it. You haven't. I'm not quite sure where to go now on this issue. I was trying to keep my comments limited to the this user fee issue. Without wanting to be extreme, this is the worst possible situation that could have arisen for you at this time. You have in Square Bay, you have got a group of people who, well, the community is frustrated, and you've got a group of people who are trying to interact and deal with that. And we've seen on the frontage fees, we've seen an original pitch 2 years ago, which was, I would be blunt, laughable in terms of the sort of rate increases that were pitched. That has steadily gone down in terms of what's being pitched. So one's left wondering, well, what really is the, call it the validity in any of the numbers? And then this happens. So staff, Remco, I know you and your team work very hard to try to get the right information out and all that. I'm not saying it's an easy job. But heavens above, this is the worst possible situation that could have occurred right now. We recognize that we need to pay reasonable amounts. So the issue I'm here for is not complaining about whether you're going to raise the rates $150. That's sort of immaterial. Whatever it costs to run the place, it costs. But I must say, I'm kind of in awe at the fact that the items that are described as requiring all of the funding, about the only one of those for Square Bay for this coming year, the only one of those that's newish is the 2,600 or whatever it is for the community engagement. The infiltration has been known about for donkey's years. So I don't really understand why it is that we're dealing with this at this stage, other than I guess that it's somehow everything slipped through the cracks, or the analyses that were done didn't catch everything. So you have a group of people there who don't understand. They look at the report and say, well, hell, we knew all of that. So why is it that all of a sudden, kaboom, we're hit from November, a 3% increase of about $20 to now maybe at best 150. It makes no sense to not raise it at all. Something has to be done. So as I say, the issue is not the raising of it. It's just the process as to how you've got there.
All right, should we?
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, should we give that one to staff, maybe to give a bit of an explanation as to how we got here?
Thank you, Director Thijs. I think I already indicated that how we got here was a combination of factors. It's a combination of factors of decisions in the past around rates. It's decisions in the past about how to fund those rates, and I think it was only the timing of the information coming out now is primarily as indicated due to the fact that we didn't do a fulsome. My apology, I shouldn't have used the word fulsome. A comprehensive overview of the analysis in as part of November, in the November rates reports. So we're improving our internal process that this is not going to happen again, and we'll have further communication. I would say I'm more than happy to explain it to the users. I'm not so engaged. I'm saying explain this part, what we're talking about right now, to the users prior to the utility bill going out, and further engage with them prior to the rates being proposed for next year. And I make the difference because I think once the decision is made by the board, if a decision is made by the board on how to fund the Square Bay underfunding, then that can be communicated to the. I'm there to communicate that to the residents itself. But ultimately, the engagement is, as the residents in the audience is referring to, is about exchanging information and trying to understand each other's point of view and build on that. And we'll use that information to base our recommendations of for the 2023 rates.
All right. Yeah, thanks for that. Now, I'm no expert on, of course, Square Bay, but I do remember from past discussions, and correct me if I'm wrong, that part of the reasons for the rates slowly decreasing or changing was because staff recognized that there's more of a willingness to do a debt financing on behalf of Square Bay. Am I correct with that? And that might be why some of the rates may have been changing over time as consultation has gone on? Oh, okay, yeah. That's part of it too. Yeah, okay. So, Mr. Galbraith, do you have any other questions or?
No, I appreciate your time on this issue, and it's more perhaps me venting the community's frustration. I would leave with this. Please ask staff to engage more fully with us on our suggestions regarding how to go forward on the frontage fees. That is really important.
Okay, Director McMahon.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I very well remember your presentation. It was.
Is that good or bad?
No, it was good. It was a really good, thoughtful presentation. I appreciate it, and I've had it in the back of my mind ever since because I'm going to have to go forward with my Wood Creek Park people at some point to talk about this, and not an easy conversation given the fairly horrendous history of Wood Creek Park and all the trauma they've been through with their sewage. So, thank you very much.
Okay, we've got Director Hiltz. You've got another question for Mr. Galbraith?
If I may, I was just asking, thanks, yeah, and twice you came here before, I believe, to do, yeah. So the frontage fees are tied to the asset management plan and that whole, so is part of the fundamental difference of opinion of what the assumptions that go into the asset management plan, is that kind of where the community differs from the staff's perspective?
The assumptions that have gone in have evolved quite significantly over the last year, I'll say, as some of the starting presumptions, which has resulted in the predicted costs going down, I think is how I'll express it. There is a broader fundamental philosophy difference, I believe, as to the correct appropriation, distribution of costs between current users and future users. And a lot of that does come back to debt financing. And yes, I strongly have said that I believe that there's been far too much of an approach to begin with about trying to finance the whole thing out of reserves, building reserves. That's just not practical. And more needs to be out of debt, which the debt piece is really what the future residents are dealing with. So it's what is fair and reasonable in terms of the distribution of costs is what the issue is.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Director Lee, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. And I believe that, well, first of all, I've enjoyed all of your presentations. Thank you. And it helps me in my area. But the question of the frontage fees, and they only pay for capital, is something I've been struggling with, especially for my Saginaw Ridge where we have 8 users and we're supposed to have 30 of them. And so these guys are really struggling to pay for the system. And somehow it keeps coming back to me that the people that are not paying are paying frontage fees, but some of the things that the user fees are covered should be coming from them, from the frontage fees. And for instance, infiltration reduction phase 1 and 2. That would be capital if it was bigger, and everybody'd be paying for it, including the frontage. A communications plan, we're actually talking about how we fund future capital, and yet just the users are paying for it. And that's not just Square Bay, by the way, that's all of the systems that we're talking about here. So it seems when we're considering this for next year, we should be considering whether there's some way we can fix that inequity. It's probably not time right now, but it's something I think we need to talk about when we get forward with our communications plan.
All right. Mr. Galbraith, you got anything else to say, or are you good?
No, I don't want to take up more of your time.
Okay.
I could comment on what
All right.
Director Lee is saying, but it's probably not the right time.
Okay, maybe you can take it offline. Yeah. Mr. Nord, do you have any questions, or?
Well, maybe not necessarily questions, but some statements that.
All right, well, do you want to? Yeah, go to the microphone and.
When you think you're out.
Well, we've got the rest of the agenda still to go through, so yeah, this is just the hardest one. Yeah, the middle one there. No, it's not on yet. The face with a.
It's actually squiggly lines.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
I wasn't going to speak, but I felt that I'm in the neighborhood. In fact, I'm within a block of the plant itself. I was also involved in the fact that with help of the staff, more than help from the staff, they did all the paperwork and everything, we got a brand new plant. Well, what scared me most of all, once that I was dodging my neighbors for quite a while after it was put in, because they got told that they were going to be paying up to $5,000 more a year in taxes to pay for the next one. There was a lot of bad information got out, and my point was, at one time, it used to be very open. The staff would come out to Cooper's Green once a year and explain all the processes, and we'd get a note before we went there of what the discussions would be about. It wasn't always fair game either, but basically it was well said, and I'll tell you honestly, the information I got is pretty scary at times over this last year that would come to the house or through the neighbors. I think what you did do is bring a lot of neighbors together, and I don't knock the RD because I think there's a lot of pre-warning. I was on the committee that brought in asset management here on the RD, and it was mostly at that time for the facilities and what it costs, and it scared the hell out of us at the time. And we were told clearly by staff that it could go to other areas and be pretty pushy on the capital. So it's not a shock to me, but it is a shock to me when I heard the number 5,000 at one time. So I think what you need to do is, when you do this communication plan, don't just make it a statement of how much you're going to pay for it, but really look at what you're trying to get across. Because I got a feeling we were listening to a program by BCIT presented to us, and this is what you're going to get. And most of us felt that's what it was when we fought back immediately. And as soon as that happened, I think communication broke down. So when you don't know on our end, most people don't know, so they come and ask me, and I try and say as much as I can to be positive about what staff have done in the past and are willing to do. But when it blows up in your face, it becomes extremely hard. So whatever process you go through, have steps clearly
and you might bring a group in which was offered their help to the RD to discuss what should be presented and what they're hearing. And you would have a lot more chance to move forward positively. I thank you for your time.
Well, thank you very much for that feedback, and I think staff and the board have heard loud and clear that more engagement is needed. Thanks in a big part to Director Pratt, who's certainly been up front and center about the need for more engagement, and I think staff will take your considerations away, and I do hope that in the future we will be able to avoid incidents such as this one, as well as kind of be clear as to where we're moving going forward. So thank you, gentlemen, and we've certainly take your feedback to heart. All right, does staff have anything to say more about this, or no? Okay. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 5.
Recommendations.
Oh, yeah, we do have some recommendations to pass, don't we? This is taken care of.
I was just about to remind you, but.
All right, we have some recommendations on page 17. Does anybody want to move those recommendations?
Or an alternative.
Or an alternative?
In light of the projects that need to be done, the underfunding that is there with the recalculation, I mean, I've voted a lot of no this year on wastewater treatment plants, so I'm not happy about having to move something. But the options that staff have presented, number 3 and number 2 are not, in my way of thinking, are not, either one of them are not fiscally responsible. I think option number 1 is a, it's an unfortunate palatable alternative, and I would move the recommendations on page 17.
All right, do we have a seconder for those? Oh, Director Hiltz, okay, is it seconded? All right, any more questions, Director Toth?
Through an unfortunate series of events, I actually get to vote on this. I appreciate the hard position that Director Pratt has been put into this, and I'm glad that it's not an area that I'm representing, because it's a difficult fight and it's a difficult thing to digest. I don't know enough about it to really, try and manipulate things or on the fly here suggest alternatives. I'm going to vote against it. Just out of my own, I've said no to a lot of things in this budget period too. And I'm wondering if option 3 would be the way to go for 2022, but again, yeah.
All right, Director Pratt.
I looked at that and I lost some sleep over it too, going and thinking about a lot of the ways to go. However, when you're looking at some of the issues that the Square Bay sewage treatment facility has had, and as GM Rosenboom said, if there had to have been one more pump out this year, the whole service would have been in deficit. So we can't go that low. We can't budget that closely. That leaves a projected $70 in reserves for option 3, and that's. And I, as an aside, when the new treatment plant first went online, my phone number was accidentally the one that was put on as the, it's just like a keystroke difference. So I know how many issues happen there because I was getting the notifications. And it was just, it was a clerical thing that happened, and I'm like, wow, is it something that the area B director gets? Or, so I do know that there are a lot of issues that do happen at the, like, just normal instances that happen, and as things have settled out, it's, we can't go down to a $70, especially, you know, the District of Sechelt has increased their sewage receptacle fees. So what do we do? So, and I think tripled, didn't the rates go up?
This year, it's only 6%.
Oh, well, but only 6. Last year it was triple. I apologize to the Square Bay residents, but I don't see the other option when we're like this is, and I think this is the position we're in. It's going to have to be, that's how I see it. And finally, I guess I'm voting in favor of a wastewater treatment increase this year, so.
All right. Well, considering we were, Director McLean.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to speak briefly to the challenge that this is, in that it is such a small service. Like at the District of Sechelt, all of our services affect nearly everyone. So the concern of trust is massive here. How do we build trust in forging a difficult path forward? I understand the challenges of asset management with each of these systems, but in moving forward, we need to build that relationship with the users because it is such a small group, and any decision is amplified. We look at another one, I think I heard 5 users. Like it's a small dollar value, but divided by 5 has a big impact. So I am very much on the fence on this one. I think Director Pratt's last comment really swayed me. I was going towards option 3 because I look at that and I compare it to the District of Sechelt sewer service. We are trying to get a proper asset management system in that place, but year after year, we are doing the minimum and just keeping it operational. We are funding the operational budget based on what needs to be done, what's breaking. And that very minimum that we need to do. We have an infiltration issue in the District of Sechelt that we need to address for long-term sustainability, but we haven't dealt with that to maintain those rates, maintain that trust, and I see a lot of parallels with this kind of system. So this is an incredibly hard decision, and it's just the beginning of many hard decisions. Or beginning for me, it's you guys have been in it for a while. But thank you.
All right. So you're sticking around for more hard decisions? Is that what you're saying?
Just today.
Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. You know, it really is, and I appreciate the situation Director Pratt's in, and I hear what Director Toth is saying. But, you know, in Gibson's, as a municipality, you know, we had an incident this week that could have resulted in a $100,000 a day fine. And I'm assuming because of the licensing with a lot of these systems that if they go out of compliance or there's a maintenance issue, the environmental fines, you know, are potentially horrendous. So, you know, for a long time, you know, keeping costs minimized, and we had it in Gibson's. Fortunately, the council before us, you know, voted on an annual 5% increase for both water and sewage. And gradually, we're getting to the point where it's the water is good, the sewage, we've still got a long way to go. And, you know, dealing with climate change, and, you know, we have huge infiltration problems. So, you know, hopefully these systems can get to a place where the residents aren't going to have these huge impacts. But, you know, you really need to have that buffer. You can't sit on a knife edge hoping it's not going to rain and you're not going to have a pump out. It's, anyway, you know, I feel awkward because, you know, being in the municipality and you've got all these systems to deal with. But, you know, I feel the pain of residents, and I believe I was here at the previous meeting when Mr. Galbraith made his presentation, but, you know, it's a hard reality that we have to deal with. Anyway, my 2 cents worth.
Well, Director Pratt, you had your hand up.
I do, and I know I don't know if you want to, you're the
Mr.
chair,
Galbraith?
you're the chair, so it's up to you, but I would like to, I do have a comment as well, so.
Okay. Well, do you have one more quick comment, Mr. Galbraith?
2 points. Square Bay is not against increases. We're not fighting the reality of increases. That's one point. It's not that we're saying we don't want to pay anything. Second point, Director McLean, you said the issue is trust, and it is now. It wasn't a trust issue before. It's evolved now very definitely into a trust issue. And you asked, I think you said, sort of, how do we deal with that? Well, you deal with it by better engagement, not telling us what you're going to do, but actually really coming with open minds, get the right group of people together, and that will enable those of us that are trying to represent the community to get people better on side. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Director Pratt.
Thank you, Peter and Gary, for coming today first, and I appreciate you being here. And the beauty of the thing in a municipality, though, is you can switch your money around, which we cannot do in a regional district. Because to my way of thinking, and as I said earlier, I put the question to the GM and the CFO. It's like, well, if we can take that 2,600 of community engagement and take it out of my constituency expense, why don't we do that? Because I'm not, and it's like, no, you can't, because of it's specific to the service area. So, so we're caught, and it's the reality of regional district budgeting. It's very siloed, and it is what it is in that way. So.
All right. Well, in the hope that this won't hang on one sanitary napkin being flushed in the future, I think we'll call the question. All those in favor? All right. Opposed? All right. Would you like that recorded? No. Okay. Thank you. Next. All right. All right. Number 5, the Jolly Roger Community Sewage Treatment Service. We've got 2 options, and staff recommendations are presented on page 26. Any questions, or does staff want to say anything about this one?
Thank you for the opportunity. My comment is valid for this one as well as for the other 7 reports. As for the option 1 is to follow the financial plan, financial sustainability policy, and increase the user fees. Option 2 is funded out of reserves. Usually we would have recommended option 1, but given the timing and the unfortunate circumstances for 2022, we're proposing option 2 to fund the underfunding, the shortfall for this year from reserves, and engage with the community further so that they are aware and can have their say on what is proposed for 2023. Thank you.
Director Pratt. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. You've said her name now.
All right, Director Pratt. Start it off, and then we'll get to you. Don't worry.
I was going to move the recommendations on page 26.
Oh, I'll second that.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Question, Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. And I should have asked this during the last one, but my apologies. My understanding is that we were required to set all of our rates and charges before the end of the year. Now, was that actually this change that we did for the Square Bay one? Is that requirement something that's within our own policies and what have you, or is that something that we have to go get special permission to be able to do?
Staff.
So for the water rates bylaw, there is a specific one because the user fee is dated annually. So it starts, the timer starts January 1st. So legislatively, you have to do that. For the wastewater ones, I don't believe we have something that is specified. Best practice would be to have it adopted prior because it's an annual fee, but it is a little bit more vague as it was more prescriptive in our other user rate bylaw.
All right. Okay. We've got a motion on the floor. Anybody have any more questions, concerns? No? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. So for number 6, I'm going to have to recuse myself as I have some pecuniary interests in the Secret Cove Community Sewage Treatment Service and the voting involved therein. I'm going to take over. I'm going to hand over the chairing to Director Lee, and then I will be back as soon as item number 6 is done. I will.
Gee, two guys first try. Let's see. Looks to me like it's, everybody knows we're on Annex E, right? And we have recommendations on page 32. And I think we've kind of talked about all this, but I would look for Director Pratt to take the lead here.
I would move the recommendations on page 32, please.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? There's a seconder. Any discussions? No? Well, let's vote then. All in favor? Any opposed? Nope, it's passed. Okay, so let's get Director Ties back in.
Can I just say, good job, Director Lee. You chaired that very well.
So I'll pass the chair back to Director Ties.
Thank you, Director Lee. Okay, item number 7, Greaves Road Community Sewage Treatment Service. Should we just move on without staff comments at this point and just see if we have any questions from the directors? I don't see any questions. The recommendations are on page 38. Is there somebody who was willing to? I see somebody who's willing to pass those.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as presented by staff on page 38.
Okay, seconded by Director Toth. Okay, any more questions? All those in favor? All right, that's unanimous. Okay, Lily Lake Community Sewage Treatment Service, number 8. Recommendations are on page 44. Is somebody willing to make that motion? Director Lee, once again.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as presented on page 44.
Okay. And we have a seconder. Okay. Any more questions? All right, all those in favor? All right, motion carries. We have item number 9, Annex H, Saginaw Ridge Community. Let me just rip things apart. There we go. Saginaw Ridge Community Sewage Treatment Service, under funding. We have recommendations on page 50. Is there somebody who would like to move those? Okay, Director Lee.
I'd like to move acceptance of the recommendations on page 50.
Okay, do we have a seconder? There's a seconder. Okay, any more questions? I see none. All those in favor? Thank you. Okay. Annex I, Roberts Creek Co-housing Community Sewage Treatment Service, under funding. On this one, I have a couple of questions. One is, and these were questions asked by the community, by the co-housing community. One is, will the upgrades potentially reduce future costs? And I wonder if staff has an answer on that one.
Thank you, Chair. I'll answer that one. I certainly hope they do. When we reclassify the plant and all of the upgrades that we've done, I certainly hope it will reduce pump outs and costs to the plant. Thank you.
Okay, we'll give that a definite maybe then. And and the other question was, where does the $15,000 contribution that the Strata put in this year fit into this picture? They were kind of surprised that there's more costs even though they donated that money.
The $15,000, thank you for the question. $15,000 is as part of the ongoing project. I'm trying to find on which page it's on here, but that's to continue on page 57, it's included in that $20,000. That's to continue the project that we've been doing at the plant and finishing up work on the sand filters, finishing up work on the tankage, and hoping to correct an infiltration in the system. And we're hoping to finish that work as soon as possible.
So if it hadn't been for the $15,000, it would be a $25,000 shortfall. Am I reading that correctly, or?
The $15,000 would have been out of reserves, where the $10,000 is part of the operating budget.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay, I'm just making some notes here, 1 sec. Okay, thanks for that. So yes, I am willing to move the recommendations as listed on page 56, seconded by Director Toth. Any further questions? No, all those in favor? All right, motion carries. Okay, down to number 11, Wood Creek Park Community Sewage Treatment Service, under funding. The recommendations are listed on page 62. Does anybody want to move that motion? We have a question by, Director McMahon. Go
Yes,
ahead.
I actually have the same question, is that that plant is hopefully due for some pretty substantial upgrades, and do we hope that that may reduce the operating costs?
To staff.
I would imagine the operating costs would probably stay the same because we're replacing a piece of infrastructure with another piece of infrastructure that probably has the same operating costs. I do hope, though, that as part of the project, we can hopefully pump out a tank here and there kind of thing. That will help the operating budget, but it's actually part of the capital project. So that's how I can see that it may assist. Thank you.
Okay, and Director McMahon?
Yeah, I'm happy to move the staff recommendations on page 62.
Okay, do we have a seconder? We have a seconder. Okay, thank you. So, any more questions? No? Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. That motion carries. And last but not least, the Langdale Community Sewage Treatment Service under funding, item number 12. The recommendations are on page 68. Has anybody? Oh, Director Hiltz?
Way over at the end here. Yeah, I'll move the recommendations as presented by staff on page 68.
Okay, we have several seconders. Okay, any further questions? No? No? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, motion carries. Well, thank you, everyone. We don't have, no communications, no new business, no in camera, and we do have adjournment. Director Hills? No, we're not ready to adjourn yet.
No, you're not ready yet, no. I just had a general question for staff about kind of the model of asset management. And that it is one model for kind of that we're using for all the plants, and just it's the variables that are changing, but the assumptions based on them are all similar. Is that's my assumption. It's you don't tailor asset management, the model, to the particular service. It's one model and you just change the figures within the model. Is that how I would see that? Thanks.
Seeing that, I assume I'm going to answer that question. So essentially, the approach that we've taken for the wastewater is most certainly from a holistic approach in that we looked at all the operational side of the house as well as the capital side, and we do look independently. So there are some key concepts that we apply, and as far as any policy statements, they aren't one size fits all, because what might be for the wastewater facilities might be different as what it is for community recreation. So policy statements, I mean, how much debt you will use to fund future costs, the life cycles that you're going to use. So the application is really that user fees will fund operations. So those are some of the policy decisions and transparency parts that you want to put. And the capital will be funded through other means. So they're very separate and distinct, and you make sure that you understand how you're funding each one, and sort of some theories and options. So there are some concepts. From a policy discussion, we're going to be bringing some more back to the board to help facilitate some of this understanding, because I think that will help. We do have an asset management policy that was adopted by the board, but that was adopted in 2014, and it's very basic in nature. And I think that we're at a point now where we want to provide a little bit more contextual to it, both from a board perspective and understanding, and a public and awareness for some of the user groups. So it really depends on what type of asset classes that we're reviewing, because for the fire department, it's going to be very, very different than it is for a facility. And so some of the decisions that the board may need to make, and in this case, what we've heard from the users is the willingness to pay and the ability to pay and the affordability. And you want to take some other considerations as far as life cycle. And some of the things we've heard is, technology changes. We have to take into consider climate change implications and adaptations. So those are evolving things that I think that we have to continue to make sure that we're very aware of reflecting into our policies and in some of the decisions that we're making as far as this as asset management goes. So I guess that's a long-winded saying, no, it's not a cookie cutter approach. There are certain type of best practices that can be considered, but it doesn't mean that you have to 100% of the time follow that. You may make some different decisions, but as far as everybody understanding what the implications of those decisions are, I think that's really what you have to do, is eyes wide open, because sometimes you may not be able to afford what the best case scenario is. I think we all go through those decisions financially, personally as well, and in our businesses. And that's no different here. In the case that local governments and all level of governments and public sector is that we're all in a state of catch up. And I think that's what makes it challenging, especially from a regional district model, because we're looking at these very micro services because we can't interchange our funding. We can't apply like a 6 or 5% annual contribution across the board. So it does make some challenges, but I appreciate everybody's input, and we know it's difficult. It's not easy in any other local government or public sector. So we understand the challenge. So we look forward to more dialogue and information sharing.
All right, thank you. Well, that looks like it brought some more questions up. Director Kroll?
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, and it was sort of sparked by Director Hiltz, is who makes the ultimate decision of what system is installed in a new subdivision? Is it the developer, or does the developer take input from the regional district, who ultimately is going to be bearing the brunt of the license for it, and track history of what systems work and what systems don't?
I'll attempt to answer that one for you. In the water systems, when developing water in the regional district, it's quite prescriptive. It's 200 millimeter ductile iron water main, that kind of a thing. We have very specific requirements of a developer, and we may ask for water modeling or our off-site improvements, along with fees like DCCs. Wastewater plants are a little bit different. The developer will approach us. We'll work with the developer on the design, and they operate the system for a couple of years, and then if we're okay with the way the system's working, then we will take over control of the treatment plant. So it's slightly different, but we certainly have a say in the systems.
All right, then we have one more question by Director McMahon.
Yes, or in the case of Wood Creek Park, it was more like a disaster recovery situation. I look forward to our discussions because another, all of these plants are different. And the situation of a plant where the subdivision is not yet built out is quite different than the situation of one that I've had where they've been paying in or arguably underpaying in for 50 years. So, it's another consideration too. So it's going to be fun. We've got consultations to come.
All right. Well, on the word of fun, I'm hoping that maybe we can move towards adjournment. All right. Is that a motion to adjourn, or is that another question?
That's a motion to adjourn.
Okay. All right. We've got a seconder, and all those in favor. All right, thank you. Staff, have there any questions or comments that have come in? I don't see anything. There's no attendees. Crickets.
Sounds like we're good.
All right, sounds like we're good. Well, thanks everyone, and see you at the next Community Services Committee meeting. Or before.
In 8 years.
In 8 years.